Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown from the Caregiving Years Training Academy. Thank you so much for joining us for our special event. We're going to help you think through what a temporary leave to manage caregiving responsibilities could look like. So we're going to do 4 25-minute workshops, and it's really just to help you get started. And we are happy to continue the conversation with you after our workshop. There's different ways to continue to connect with us. We want to be an ongoing resource for you. Okay, and I am the first presenter, so I'm going to kick us off, and I'm going to start us with really thinking through what are the triggers that could actually make you think I need to take a leave. Okay. So just a little bit about me. I started working with family caregivers in 1990. I started helping my dad in 2004, continued to help and care for him until he died just this past July of 2023. I helped my mom for 7 years. She died in August of 2022. And my brother unexpectedly died a year to the date before my mom died. So I have been managing different crises as I've been keeping my business afloat. And I've been thinking through, what does it look like to actually think through a plan to take time off? So I thought about different triggers that we can be aware of. And it can be a caree's decline, adding or changing health. It could be a crisis like a hospitalization, could be transitions. So for instance, it's the crisis in the hospitalization, but we all know that crisis doesn't end at hospital discharge. There's also that transition to a different care setting, for instance, like a skilled nursing facility, a transition to different programs that might help at home, like home health and palliative care. Or it could be that someone in your family, your caree, was managing at home okay, and now can't. And so you're looking for the transition to a new setting for living, like assisted living, independent living, or memory care, for instance. End of life care could also be a trigger to think through to actually take a temporary leave. We think about hospice services coming into the house, and we think hospice is going to do a lot for us. They do some, but we do, I would say, the bulk of the work. What I mean by that is once you get into a stage where you are managing pain meds for your caree, you are often dispensing pain meds every 4 hours. And it's the family who does that. It's the family who receives the pain meds through hospice. The hospice nurse will tell you what the pain meds are, and then you're the one giving them. And again, it's typically every 4 hours. So you can imagine what that looks like over a 24-hour period and how much work is involved in managing that. So end of life care can be a trigger. So your caree starts to receive hospice services, and then it's really working with the hospice team to better understand how much time is left and what care will be needed as your caree gets closer to death. I also wanted to mention that sometimes we think about a temporary leave during caregiving, but we might not think about it after caregiving. I'm going to give you some suggestions to think about after caregiving ends and why you might consider a temporary leave. So as you think through the triggers and you're thinking through them before they happen, it can help you really think through, what does that look like? Susan, go ahead. I think Susan raised her hand. Go ahead if you want to unmute and ask a question. Or if easier, you are welcome to type your questions in the chat room. That's okay too. The reality of caregiving is that the declines are going to happen and there's going to be disruptions in health. So you might feel like we have got a good situation with home care right now, and I hate to say this, but the reality is there's going to be a disruption. It could be that the home health aide or the CNA is sick, takes a vacation, or simply is no longer available. So you've set up care, and it's important to think through what will we do if this changes? And it might be that the change is the professional caregiver gets sick or leaves, or for whatever reason is no longer the right fit. So if you work with a home care agency, for instance, you're going to actually work through what's the backup plan for a professional caregiver who gets sick or isn't the right fit or just isn't available any longer. And that kind of transition, takes managing, which is why that might be the time where you think, I need to take a leave. And Kathy's going to talk about benefits that you can use to manage your leave, paid and unpaid. It could be that sometimes you take a leave that's for 2 weeks, for instance, to set up a new type of care routine. It also could be that when there's a hospitalization, maybe you think we can manage this hospitalization while I continue to work. It's just after the discharge from the hospital that I need to take a leave. And I might need just 2 weeks to get care set up, to organize the changes, to make sure that everybody is settled and my caree has what he or she needs. It can help to think through what has happened in the past and how you managed and what worked and what you would change about what you did. So after caregiving ends, I think oftentimes we feel like, okay, everything will be okay. And I want to let you know that after caregiving ends, closing out the estate, especially if you have to sell a house, is very time intensive. And the other thing that I found after my mom died and after my dad died is my body ached, absolutely hurt. And I really needed to take some time to let my body heal. So a leave after caregiving ends could be to manage the estate and for your own well-being, to give yourself a chance to actually sleep through the night, get caught up. I felt like after my dad died, I spent about a month getting caught up on 4 years of stuff that I just was like, well, that's not the priority. I'll just let it be. Okay, so those are some triggers to think about that can help you plan ahead to think through, if this happens, then we're going to actually think through what my leave looks like. The other part of this, though, is we look at triggers of what happens to a caree that could lead to you taking time off. But there might be times in your life that it's just not wise to take a leave. And I figured this out with my own business. I would tell my siblings and my parents that I always was going to keep any gig that a company hired me for, because that was my source of revenue. So if I had a workshop that's a company had hired for me to deliver, I always kept those, including if it required travel. So travel dropped off when the pandemic happened, but I did a lot more traveling prior to that. And I would choose an airline that had flexible fees around if I had to fly home unexpectedly. So I always flew Southwest. If you've attended any of the other workshops, I've talked about this. So I live 10 minutes from O'Hare, but I would drive an hour to Midway, because that's the only airport Southwest flew out of. And that allowed me the flexibility if I needed to return home quickly. And unfortunately, that happened. I would have to return home quickly for different situations. So it might be for you that there's a busy time at work that you have to be at work for. It could be that you have certain vacations planned. I always found that anytime I cleared my schedule to take time off, something happened. It typically was my dad fell or had some type of decline. And so I never actually took that time off. And when I look back at it, I think, oh my gosh, I wish I would have figured out some way to actually continue to take some time off, even if it was just a half a day. There might be important events in your family or in your life that you think, I need to keep the commitments to those important events. And then in your own family, it might be that when school starts for the kids, or when you have a break from school, or when the school season ends, you want to be available for your kids, and it's just not possible to take a break, to take a leave. There might also be important moments in your kids' lives that you think, I need to be at these tournaments. I need to be a part of these graduations. I have 4 siblings. My brother had died. He was helpful. I have an older sister who doesn't help, and I have a younger sister who helped, and she has triplets, and they all ran cross country and track. And so we always knew that her attending those tournaments was her priority. So I always knew when those tournaments were happening, and I always knew that she wouldn't be available. And I never had a problem with that. I always encouraged her to just go, have fun. Everything would be okay while she was gone. And then there might be other important events like graduations. Those are important for you to be a part of. We think that we have to give everything up to be available during our caregiving experience. And the truth is, we have to keep what makes us feel connected to life during our caregiving experience. It's absolutely critical that we do that. Okay, so you've been thinking through what are the triggers that would lead to me thinking through taking a leave, and then when wouldn't you take a leave? So I think once you start that thought process, it leads to a communication strategy. So who could you talk to? Managers, coworkers, family members. I'm going to give you some suggestions, and I want to let you know that you're going to know best about how to approach these individuals to have a conversation. But I wanted to give you some words to at least start with. And I think it's helpful to think, who do you know who has taken a leave? And ask them what it was like. So it could be a coworker in your employer, or it could be a colleague who works for a different employer, but can give you some guidance. It's okay if their leave is for different reasons than yours. So for instance, if you don't know someone who took a leave because they had a child or adopted a child, it's still helpful to understand, how did they approach that leave? How did they work with their manager? How did they work with coworkers to prepare for that leave? And what benefits did they use within their workplace? Okay, so I would suggest first reach out to an ally. And then if you felt comfortable reaching out to your manager, this is what the conversation can sound like. Again, you're going to know best how to approach your manager. It might be that first you approach HR and then you approach your manager. Again, you'll know the best strategy based on the relationships within your team and with your manager. So it could sound like this with your manager. I'm caring for my parent. I've learned the hard way that the unexpected can happen at any time. I'd like to put plans in place in case I have to take time off to manage a crisis, like a hospitalization or a decline in my caree's health, or when my caree reaches end of life. What guidance can you offer so you have what you need in case I need to take a leave? So notice that it's really thinking through approaching your manager to ensure your manager has what he or she needs. And then if you haven't reached out to HR yet, you can also say, who in HR could offer additional guidance. Now, I think oftentimes we know that something's going to go wrong during a caregiving experience, but we just kind of don't know what, and we're worried about the impact, so we stay quiet about it. And what we're hoping to provide with you today is some insights to help you feel like, I don't have to be quiet about this. I can be proactive about it. And that's why I would suggest having a conversation with your manager. Again, you'll know best how to approach your manager and the words to use, but I wanted to give you some guidance. I think staying secret about it with hopes that it'll never happen keeps us in the back where we're going to have to be reactive. And what we want to be is proactive. So we don't jeopardize, for instance, our workplace security, our relationships with others in our life, and our own well-being. Okay, so then if you wanted to, you could also have a conversation with your coworkers, and you can say, I'm caring for my mom. I've learned the hard way that the unexpected can happen. I'm trying to figure out what are the plans I could put in place in case of. What information about my work can I share now that will help if I need to take time off? And then offer to do the same for your coworker. How can I support you in case you need to take time off? Now, you might want to talk to your manager first about having conversations with your coworkers, or you might want to say, I'm going to talk to our manager, but I wanted to reach out to you first. You know, how do you put plans in place in case of a crisis? I know that you care for your dad. I care for my mom. Just trying to think through so that everybody feels prepared and no one is left in a lurch. I don't want to leave anyone in a lurch. Okay, so those are conversations that you can think about for your manager and your coworker. Again, first starting with an ally to ask for suggestions. And then in your family, you might have a conversation with siblings that sounds like this. I want to be available as much as possible for our parents. At times, I have to prioritize work and other family responsibilities. I know it's the same for you. So let's talk out priorities and plans so our parents continue to receive the care they need and we can manage our own responsibilities. I have Kindle books that are available for free for you to download on today, which is September 22nd. If that's not the right date for today, please let me know. And September 23rd. And in a book that I wrote that stages the caregiving experience, I include tips on how to manage a family meeting. So you can use those tips to have a family meeting around who takes time off and when. And then, if appropriate, you could also have a follow-up meeting with your caree. Now, again, you'll know best about whether or not it's appropriate for your caree to participate in a meeting. And if appropriate, the conversation with your caree can sound like, I want to be available as much as I can. At times, I have to prioritize other responsibilities. Siblings and I would like to meet to talk out our priorities and plans with you so we all have what we need. And again, it's not surprising anyone. So for instance, I never wanted to surprise my parents with my unavailability. I always wanted to give them a heads up when I wouldn't be available. So if I was leading a day-long training session, I would always say, I'm unavailable between these hours. If I was available, I was available. If I wasn't, I wanted to let them know that so they could call someone else if they needed help. Now, sometimes that didn't actually work. So they did get used to always calling me if there was a crisis. So they still would call me sometimes if there was a crisis and I was in a training session and we just kind of figured it out. But I always knew that I didn't have to stop, for instance, a training session. I could reach out to my brother and my sister. So even if my parents made the first call to me, I made the second and the third calls to others. I didn't stop what I was doing. I didn't cancel anything. I always kept the responsibility. That was very important to me. And my parents knew it was important to me too. It's just that in a crisis, they always would be like, oh my gosh, we've got to call Denise. And that was okay. But then I knew to call someone else. And the most recent example is in March, I was leading a training program on a Sunday, which was unusual. 2 minutes before I was starting, my dad called me and I knew something had happened. And he said, I just checked my bank account and someone has stolen $4,000 from me. And someone had stolen $4,000 from him. So I said, okay, I'm going to call Keith. So I called my brother, who then managed the situation to help. And interestingly enough, they found the person who actually stole the money. And even though my dad has died, my brother was on the checking account. So my brother is going to be part of prosecuting the offender. Isn't that interesting that they actually were able to find the person that did it? Okay, so it could be that you have planning meetings with siblings and your caree when appropriate in January, every quarter, twice a year, January and June. And again, it's just thinking through who's available, who's taking a vacation, who has a busy season coming up, who has flexibility, who doesn't. And it also could be that you think through who has flexibility on certain days of the week. I do want to say that realistically, we know that there are members of the family who are not going to help. So again, my older sister, we knew she was not going to help. So we just never asked her. So you'll know who in the family can help. And it might be that you have these strategic planning sessions with just those people. And you let go of asking anybody else, knowing that they're just not going to help. It's unfortunate, it's aggravating, it's maddening, and it's the reality. I want to mention too, Kathy's going to talk about how do you figure out what's available for you for a paid or an unpaid leave. You can think through your own budget to manage if it's an unpaid leave. So what can you start saving now? And you might think, oh my gosh, I just don't know if I can save anything. It only matters that you start saving something. If it's $1 a week that you start saving to help offset the costs, when you have to take a leave, start saving $1 a week. Just commit to saving what you can, saving your coins, saving what's left over when you go to Starbucks to get a coffee. Just start thinking through what's possible and then commit to it. You also can think through what are other ways to get paid or to be reimbursed if you have to take unpaid leave. And it could be that you think through a cash gift that a caree or another sibling provides for you. So you can receive up to $17,000 this year. It'll change for next year. They haven't actually released what it'll be in 2024, but it's all on the IRS website. Your caree could give you a cash gift of up to $17,000, and you are not taxed on that, and your caree doesn't have to worry about what are the tax implications for him or her. Now, you might want to meet with a financial planner before you start to do anything like this, because you don't want to jeopardize any future Medicaid programs that your caree might qualify for. But I just wanted to let you know that you could think about what are the other opportunities to offset costs if you have to take an unpaid leave. Now, if you take an unpaid leave, you can't take another job, can't work anywhere else, but you could receive a cash gift from your caree. It doesn't have to be 17,000. It could be 5,000. It could be 10,000. Whatever feels affordable. Again, you can think through this with a financial planner. Okay, we have lots of resources that we're going to share before we close for today. We're going to also share how to get your CEUs if you are here for your CEUs. So I will let you know during our breaks and before we close how to access our resources and how to get your CEUs. So all will be given to you before we close for today. So Kathy's going to continue the conversation, and she's going to get a little more specific about what are the benefits you can use when you're looking to take a leave. Okay, Kathy, go for it. Oh, you know what? Sorry, Kathy, you know what? I'm going to stop the recording and start it up again.